you can coach guys the same way. It's overblown. It's completely overblown on what you can and can't do anymore. Now, how you treat players, has changed significantly, and for the better, mind you. But you can still hold them accountable. You can still coach them hard. They all want to win. They want to do what you put them in place to do. They just want to know why, and ultimately that's why you got to do it as a coach. You got to tell them, and you got to hold them accountable to it.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by the head men's basketball coach at Stephen F. Austin, Matt Braeuer. Coach Braeuer played at Wichita State from 2004 to 2008, where he led the Shockers to a Sweet 16 finish and a top 10 national ranking. He finished in the top 15 in career threes made and career assists. Coach Braeuer started his 17-year coaching career as a GA at Wichita State. He then made several stops as an assistant coach at Maryland, Sam Houston State, College of Charleston, North Texas, and Texas Tech. In the spring of 2025, Coach Braeuer was named the next head men's coach at Stephen F. Austin. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
The Jamodi Podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
Coach,
What's going on?
how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going pretty good. How about yourself?
All good here. Thank you so much for doing this, giving up your time. This is an honor for me.
I don't know about that, man. I'm just a regular Joe Schmo, man.
Well, yes and no. A couple things. You were a heck of a player. I didn't realize how good of a basketball player you were back in the day and the career that you had. And then you've had an amazing path to get to where you are. And congratulations on SFA job. That's incredible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, your sister is Becky, correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay, so
she is.
I went to point guard college with Becky back when I was in high school.
She is in the other room right now and is going to really laugh when she heard that. And obviously she left a huge impact on you that you remember that from back in the day.
Yeah, well, I went twice, and one time I almost bit my tongue off, so it was hard to forget that one. But I want to say the one that her and I went to was in St. Ed's, maybe. It was either St. Ed's or in Dallas, one of the two. But yeah, small world, man.
That is. What did you like about the point guard college camps back then?
I thought it was really detailed. I was still kind of am. I'm not I can get a little bit bored at times if it's a little stale. And so at times, like my only issue with point guard college for me at times, especially at that age, was it felt like you barely played.
Yeah.
You didn't do a lot of actual basketball stuff. I mean, you did, but it felt like you should do more.
Well, they were so controlled. The concepts that you did in the classroom, you did drills that related directly to those, but you didn't have a lot of what now they call at PGC is bike riding time, where you actually get to play and try some things and make mistakes, hop off or fall off the bike and get back on. Mono and those guys have really taken. But was Dick the director back then, or was you after him?
Man, that's a great question. It was a long time ago.
Okay.
So that would have been 2002. So it was like almost 23 years ago.
I bet it was, though, because I'm not sure when he passed away, but it might have been Dina. It might have been Dina at that point.
You know what? It was Dina. That name sounds really familiar. Yep.
Yeah. So, Dick DeVenzio was obviously the founder of it, and he passed away probably in 2001, because I think I had been a freshman at Baylor. And then, and then I'd heard about it, but then Dina took it over, and then Mono and those TJ and Tyler and those guys from there, and Chad. So it's in a really good place, but he was a genius. But you're right. If you wanted, and that's where, when I directed for them, I always had to tell the kids and parents right from the very beginning, this is not a competition camp.
Yeah,
You're going to
I
learn a
need it to be
ton.
competition.
I think all, but see, that's the thing when we would sprinkle that stuff in, oh, they ate it up. And then maybe we felt like we, deposited into their account enough to where we could get them back in the classroom again. But that's funny. Funny, the connection there, man.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's crazy.
I also want to give a big shout out to Coach Jimmy Smith for creating this or making this happen. I've known Jimmy since college, and then he did such a great job, really, at any stop that he's been at, and consider him a friend. So thank you, Coach, for setting this up.
Yeah, he's a great friend of mine. I'm glad I got him on staff. That's for sure.
Yeah. So how's it going there, man?
It's going good, man. We got we retained 2 guys on the roster that we felt really good about keeping here, and we've signed 9 more, so we've got 11 on the roster. Got one more coming tomorrow, and another one coming after that. So hopefully we'll have the roster done at least to the 13 scholarships now on Wednesday. Hopefully that's the plan, anyway. So it's been a whirlwind, though, as you know. The first years are always the hardest, and it's especially hard because the family's not being with you, and you're just trying to put together a roster in as fast as possible, and
Yeah.
you're trying to make sure you get it right with the character and with the talent, and you're hiring a staff too. So just all of it together, it's a lot, but it's also a lot of fun too, building.
I was just thinking it's interesting because you hear so many, not necessarily coaches, but people more outside of what you're doing talk about how you're feeling. I don't hear a lot of college coaches saying they can't stand how it is now, or they're struggling with the way it's changed or whatnot. But you hear that from outside voices about how, man, we've had a team, we've had a culture, and now it's all gone, and we have to bring in new guys. But going to some place and getting to bring in pretty much all guys that you've gone out and recruited from year one, that is a little bit different than maybe 5-10 years ago, where you take over a place, you're going to have 3/4 of the team that was there, and you got to figure out how it's going to work the first year. So maybe you get to kind of set your culture, your way of doing things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think the ability to come in year one as a new head coach and have a lot of success early is greater. It's more prevalent than it's ever been. Not going to say it's easy by any means, but you're able to completely turn over a roster and be competitive and win championships in year one. And it was 10 years ago, I mean, it was rare if you saw somebody take over a program and win their conference championship the first year. And now it happens quite a bit. It's certainly not as rare as it used to be.
You got to think about it. When you take over a program and the players are existing already there, they were recruited by someone else for the system that person wanted, and maybe it was good or not. Sometimes when people leave, it's not always for bad reasons, right? Or the
Correct.
place was in a bad spot. But then the new person comes in, and again, do they adjust their style to the existing players while they're waiting for their group? Yeah, you get to kind of fast track that. So I basically just made the point again that you had made, and then I just repeated myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, we're in a whole different ball game nowadays with NIL and roster construction, and everybody says it. You can either complain about it, or you can work and just. I mean, it's part of the deal now.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to listen to you if you complain. Nobody's going to care if you complain. At the end of the day, you got to build your roster, and you got to win games, and you have to do it the way that you think is best.
Just listening to the coaches that went deep into the tournament this year, majority of them were talking about it kind of like that, where almost like this is the best thing ever that we're getting. Like Bruce Pearl talking about, yeah, I mean, a lot of our guys are going to get to benefit from what we're doing right now, but not, it was just so different from maybe what you hear or what, as a high school coach, you might think how college coaches feel about it. But there's those guys out there that are fully embracing it and seeing the good parts of it. And maybe there's an advantage there.
Yeah, I mean, it's all how you look at it, right? It's just like anything in life. If you feel like it's something that you can jump on and be aggressive and be successful with, just like anything in life or business, the people that grab the bull by the horns and go make things happen are typically the ones that are successful, and that's kind of what you have to do.
Well, Coach, I'd love to know if you had to pick 3 characteristics of great coaches, and you've played for some and you've worked for so many. Grant McCaslin, one of my favorite people, and I would have loved to play for that guy. I think he's the kind of guy that it gets players to want to run through a brick wall for him. So you've been around those types of leaders. What are those three characteristics if you had to choose three?
Yeah, I think, I've obviously worked for great coaches. You could go so many different ways. I think there's a lot of successful coaches that are different than others. And, I'd say the one piece that I've learned, and I knew obviously when I was playing and when I first got into coaching, but, the accountability, and these two words kind of go together, but the coaches that hold people accountable, but also aren't afraid of confrontation, is probably one of the biggest characteristics of a successful coach. And it doesn't always mean like the yelling and the screaming and the cursing, but when you're holding people accountable, there's going to be some pushback at times. And so you can't be afraid of the confrontation of that pushback, because people can tell you what they want. People want structure, and the guys and the players know when they have structure, how successful they are. And then when they go to a place that doesn't have the structure or the accountability structure, they yearn for it and they don't realize it until they don't have it anymore. So I think that's one big thing, that is really key for a good coach. Being adaptable is probably another thing that I'd say is a good one, because not every team you're going to recruit, you may have a style you recruit to. You may have, your best players may be a certain type of player, but if you're not adaptable to your surroundings, to who you're coaching on a year-to-year basis, especially nowadays, it's just so important. You got to adapt, and not necessarily changing how accountable you are or confrontational you are in those terms, but just adapting to the type of player you're coaching on a year-to-year basis is something that I think is really important and probably a little bit undervalued. Some guys that think, well, it's my way or the highway. Like, I think those work at times, but I just think with the transfer portal and everywhere it is now, like, I think you have to adapt to who you have on your roster and the type of players or style that you're trying to coach within that roster, because it may not always be the same. So I think those are two big ones. And then obviously I think, just being a communicator, clear, concise messaging. Look, I have a hard time concentrating for 3 hours for a practice. So we don't practice that long, or we won't practice that long. We haven't done it yet. But, so communicate, be clear, be concise. They only have a few seconds before their ADD's kicking in, right? So mine as well. So, really communicate with them. Tell them why you're doing something. This is why we're doing it. This is how we need to do it. And they can hear you. They can see it. And I think it's something that when you're able to do that, I think it gives the guys, and the players a little bit easier avenue to understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then they just go out there and they do it to the best of their ability.
I think you're right on the money with the communication being short, being crisp. The accountability piece, I think, almost links into that, but towards coaches, because I think if we were honest, most of us would say we talk way longer in practice than we think we do. So maybe it's having somebody time how long you're talking at a certain time, or recording yourself and listening back to it, watching the film and timing on your own. But in the moment, coach, how do you hold yourself and your assistant coaches accountable to keeping your communication concise?
Yeah, so we actually, we did it in kind of a joking way at Texas Tech, but, when I would show defensive clips from either practice or the game, and Coach Lender would show offensive clips from the practice or the game, we would time each other to see who could be up there the least amount of time. And so, you have to get your message across, right? Yeah. You can't sacrifice your message because of time, because the message is still really important. So you have to get that point across. But the fluff and the unnecessary part of the communication, which is hard to get rid of, if you can do that and you can be self-aware of maybe, hey, I've been standing up here too long, or I'm looking at my guys in the eyes and they're you can tell they're fading, right? Yeah. So I think if you're able to do that stuff and have a self-awareness of it, can really help keep it short and concise.
Yeah, and I think the danger I always fall into is I repeat myself. I'll give the rules to the game, and then maybe something else, and then I'll repeat the rules to the game again, and then maybe even a third time. And what I need is somebody reminding me. And Tyler Costin had a great idea of there's basically three types of, and I may be butchering this, Tyler, so I'm sorry, but there's three types of, sound bites that you want to give in practice. There's that 7 second where it's quick, it's in and out. It's a lot like a game. And there's a 20 seconds, but then there's a 30, and the 30 is maybe where you bring them in, but kind of keeping in mind those time limits. But I love the game that you and the assistant played. Did Coach McCaslin know that you guys were playing that game?
I think every once in a while he knew, and we didn't do it every time. There
Right.
obviously is a time and a place for it. But we tried to do it, every once in a while to try to keep each other honest. But I mean, you said you feel like you're repeating yourself, but the quote that I always got is like, coaching is repeating itself. Like that is a coach. Like that is part of coaching. You have to continually repeat yourself over and over and over. And that's probably why coaches lose their mind every once in a while, because they're saying the same thing over and over again, and it gets frustrating and it gets tiring. But ultimately, that's part of coaching, is just repeating yourself.
I think you nailed it with the adaptability part, especially with how the game is today. But I think even for a high school coach, that you may think who you have coming up, from year to year, and you maybe have a style of play that you really like, but you got to think about, what does it really fit this group of guys? I can't be so fixed in my mindset there. Also, does it work in the district or the league that you play in? Because you can want to play fast, but if, like a buddy told me years ago, man, I don't think you have the horses to do what you're trying to do. Hurt my feelings, but I was too close to it. I needed somebody who could zoom out and really see that. So I think you're right on the money there.
Yeah, I mean, people always ask, North Texas, we played, I think we were the slowest or maybe the second slowest tempo in the country. And a lot of that had to do with, we took good shots and we didn't, play crazy, and we made people work when they were trying to score against us. Yeah. But you have to, like, people always ask Coach Mack, well, how are you going to play at the high major level? Well, we're going to play to win, and whatever we gives ourselves the best chance to win, we're going to play that way, right? Can you recruit a higher caliber athlete, higher caliber player at Texas Tech than you could at North Texas? Yeah, I mean, I think that's the truth, and I think
but so are your competitors too, right? So,
exactly.
Can you be different in some way, or are you trying to be better at what they're doing? That's a tough
there's no
one.
question. Yep, exactly.
I love the connection between accountability and confrontation. And with the climate that you're in right now, how do you walk that line of, you want to hold them accountable, there's going to be some confrontation, but you also want to keep your players, and you want to keep them, right? And even at the high school level, I want them to enjoy coming to the gym every day. But you're right. They got to have structure. But how do you walk that line between accountability and confrontation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's relationships, right? I mean, if they know that you care about them, the old coaching cliche, they don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. Yep. I don't repeat that one very often.
But it's so true, though.
It is true. And so, like, the relationship piece is important, but you can't, like, there was a deal, man, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago on Twitter, and somebody in the Dallas media had talked about, or somebody had said something about how, well, you can't coach your players hard anymore. Like, that's BS to me. You can coach them the exact same way you could always coach them. You just have to have a relationship with them. Yeah. Like I said, they do want to be held accountable. Now, is it easier to hold guys accountable and take them out for defensive mistakes than if you're yanking them out of the game for an offensive mistake? Absolutely. Okay. It's a lot easier to say, well, this is what you did wrong defensively, and this is what we have to do to correct it because it was a scouting mistake, whatever it may have been, right? If you take them out for offense, well, coach doesn't believe in my game, coach is holding me back. Like, those things can be a little bit more prevalent in the players' minds, but you can coach guys the same way. It's overblown. It's completely overblown on what you can and can't do anymore. Now, how you treat players, that has changed significantly, and for the better, mind you. But you can still hold them accountable. You can still coach them hard. They all want to win. They want to do what you put them in place to do. They just want to know why, and ultimately that's why you got to do it as a coach. You got to tell them, and you got to hold them accountable to it.
Coach, I love that. I reject the idea that you can't have discipline and still have fun in practice.
Yep. Exactly.
That those two things can't exist. And you're so right. The The tough thing that's come from all of this is that we can't be transactional anymore. Like that's what it's for, the type of do this or else. Well, or
Yep.
else, coach, I'm just going to go over here. That's a good thing that it has stretched all of us to have those relationships that, man, my first coach, not Coach Drew, one of our first meetings, he said, listen, it's the team here and you here. You see, like he put his hands like that, like a super wide gap in between those things. And I was like, okay. And he also said, I'm not your friend. You have enough friends. I'm your basketball coach. I agree with the friend part, but it seemed more like this isn't really a relationship. I only care about what you can do on the floor for me in that moment. You're right. Like that has changed, and that's a good thing, man.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's just overblown, and I think it's overblown from like the media's perspective, and I'm not talking bad about the media by any means, but just like I think it's the easy thing to say, right? Everybody can get up and leave at the drop of a hat, so it's the easy thing to say. Well, you can't coach them as hard anymore. I mean, that's not really true. They're going to leave if they want to leave, whether you coach them hard or not. And so why not coach them the best way to make them as successful as they can be and to make your team as successful as it can be as well.
Yeah, and make the big time where you are. Make this the place
Yep.
that they just can't imagine. If anybody thinks you can't coach them hard, just watch Houston. Watch
Yeah, no,
Kellen
there's no doubt.
Sampson. And they keep a lot of their dudes, but he
Mm-hmm.
is all over them. But it's almost like, again, the relationship is there. When I was able to have, a hoops talk with him, he talked about how much time they spend in the gym with those guys, the
They do.
assistant coaches, and he's up there all the time. I think, how do we let our players know how much we care about them? There has to be a time investment there, because if it's just words, well, more is caught than taught. And I think you're right on the money.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it.
And you've worked for some great guys like we talked about. And so you've probably seen some awesome standards and pillars from them, but now you're getting this opportunity at a great school to set your own. So what are the standards and pillars of your program?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very similar to most people. I would assume, hard work is a non-negotiable, right? I mean, you have to work hard when you're in practice. I think the thing that's changed since I was in college, because I always tell people, like, I never worked on my game individually in college. Never. Very rare. Now, we couldn't even work with the coaches in the summer back then.
Yeah.
But what we did was we played pickup every day. And our pickup games weren't for 45 minutes. They were for 2 hours. And we would play games best of 11. I mean, we'd have 10 guys out there and you're just playing best of 11 and you're playing a series. And so like it was different, right? Well, like I tell everybody, I don't particularly like working on individual skill in practice, because now it takes practice from 2 hours to 2 hours and 30 minutes to 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it becomes too long for everybody. So my deal is, let's compete, let's get after it, let's be efficient in practice. So now you have to come back on your own and get some work in on your own, right? Whether that's the gun, whether that's a manager rebounding for you. It's not that you're out there getting a whole nother 45-minute, workout in. You're just getting the shots up that you used to do in practice back in the day when we do 4 or 5 shooting drills, or you'd shoot free throws in the middle of practice. Like stuff that I just think you're at this point, I think you're better off being competitive in the practice segment, because everybody works on their own now. That's just like part of the deal. So, the hard work, I think, is something that, is always going to be, very important and a pillar in our program. You have to be coachable. Look, if you're not coachable, then ultimately you're A, not going to play, and B, you're just not going to be here very long. It's too hard to be good and to win championships if you're fighting your players to listen to what you're saying. So being coachable is extremely important. And then being a great teammate. The one thing, I was a point guard, I was a coach's son. I could connect a team pretty well. I wasn't the best player by any means in college. I was a connector. I was a voice. I was competitive, all those things. The one thing I always thought that I was good at was being a great teammate, right? And it just was something that felt like I did naturally.
Yeah.
And as a coach, when you start transitioning to that, you kind of lose sight of it because you're not in it with your teammates. So you can kind of lose sight of like dapping people up or telling people good pass or a good shot or whatever it may be that you're talking to and you're communicating with your own teammates. And that's the one thing with Coach McCaslin, like, that really, he took it to a whole nother level that I hadn't even really been a part of, because you just assume it happens until you start watching it and you're like, man, it's not happening. So, like when we're doing drills where it's just 2-on-0 or 3-on-0 or whatever it may be, and somebody makes a pocket pass and he finishes with the dunk, like immediately, as soon as you land, you're pointing and you're yelling good pass, right? Or if you miss a shot, you're not worried about the shot you just missed. You're telling your teammate good pass. Because whenever you do that, it takes the selfishness away from, well, I just missed a shot, and now you can move on to the next play a little easier, right? And so those were all things that we really harped on a lot in practice. Like who passed you that, right? Because a lot of, everybody, they miss a shot. What do? They either put their head down, or they want to, wipe their hands or something silly, right?
That's right. I can't believe I missed a shot. It's the first time it's ever happened.
Come on, man, you're gonna miss shots. Be a good teammate.
Yeah.
Like be a great teammate, And when you're a great teammate, then I think it connects everybody together. And those are when you can handle, the adverse situations that always arise within a team. Toughness and grit. Every team I've ever been on or coached or been a coach on that's been successful has had those two things. If you're not tough, you don't have any grit on a consistent basis, then ultimately when things get hard, you fold. It's not that complicated. It's not necessarily easy to get toughness and grit. I think that's where the accountability piece is important, in the confrontation of, okay, well, you're not doing this right. We're going to do it until we do it right. And I think that's how you build your toughness. That's how you build your grit. You just keep fighting them every day, until eventually it just kind of becomes who they are, right? And then the last thing that by far and large, Coach McCaslin's the best I've ever been around at doing this is belief. A word that's thrown around a lot. Oh, you don't believe in me. The belief when we left meetings or when Coach Mack talked to the team, or after practice, verbalizing after games, whatever it was, scouting reports, you never, ever left those meetings not in complete belief that we were going to win. Ever. Never once were you like, we're not going to win. Because his ability to make you believe in the plan, okay, in your teammates, in winning a game, whatever it may be, was at the most highest elite level that I've ever been around. And so if you don't have that belief as a program, then you don't have toughness and grit. Then you're not coachable because you don't believe in the plan, right? So there's so many things that go into the belief part, but it was by far one of the best things that Coach Mack has ever done in the 7 years that I worked with him is his ability to make people believe in what we're doing and how we're going to do it, and we're going to win.
Great list. And I wrote down a few things to go back over. This may be tough, the belief part.
Yeah.
And a person like Coach that can't, you said he's the best ever. He can do that. Well, as Gannon Baker said, you can't coach something you don't possess. So how, as a coach, do you build that ability to get others to believe in the vision, to bring them in?
Man,
And might be tough.
that's a great question. It's probably one that I'm going to have to figure out myself. Naturally, as a coach, especially as an assistant, I've always been worst case scenario, right? I've always tried to think, okay, what could go wrong here so I can try to prepare to fix it if it does happen, right? So
which is valuable, because it's not, I wouldn't call that being pessimistic. I just, like, you want to be like, it's a very much a point guard way of, to me, looking at it, is going into it like, okay, like if they do this, I have to be prepared and counter with this. And so because I think I may be on the other side sometimes. I don't feel like I'm a very good scout, because I watch a few minutes. I'm like, oh, well, we're going to blow that up. Like, they're going to struggle with this against us. And then I need my assistant coaches that I think have a better lens, kind of like yours, that will say, well, man, this could be a problem. The way that they're doing this, like, we have to be prepared for that. So I don't look at that as bad. The one I try to answer the question a little bit myself of when you walk into a meeting with your team and your coaches, And I want them to leave believing in this vision that we have for maybe even this practice or this next game, or even just the culture style of play. I think there has to be a genuine alignment within you.
Oh yeah.
It has to be authentic to who you are and what you believe as a coach of how basketball can be played. Because I think you know this, right? Like they will smell a fraud or fear or someone that's not being genuine. So, like, how does Coach Mack get to do that? I think he genuinely believes in what he's talking about, right? So,
No,
like,
yeah.
that's one part, but keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, A, he's done it a long enough time.
Sure.
And B, he's won everywhere he's ever been. So there is a genuineness about how he feels about that because he knows what works, he knows what doesn't work. But to answer your question, like the things that come to my mind when you ask that question, whether it's right or wrong, the thing that comes to my mind is being confident and steadfast in what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you're out there stuttering around, if you're kind of like, you say something and then 4 minutes later in your talk you contradict what you said, that's where it can get a
Coach,
little bit.
I thought you said we're doing this.
Exactly.
You lost it, man. You lost it right there.
Yep. So, and look, Coach Mack he's a preacher by nature. His father was a preacher.
It's kind of not fair to compare yourself to him or Coach Tang or Paul Mills. Like all
Yeah.
of those dudes, I literally watched the other two preach in front of us, and I thought they're incredible. I can't do that. I can't. So keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean it's what he is. He's a preacher by nature. So he can go up there and he'll tell you himself before practice. He'd be like, all right, we're gonna talk. We're gonna be in the film room for 30 minutes of 10 minutes talk, 20 minutes film, and we're all kind of looking at him like, sure, there's no way we're gonna be in there for 30 minutes. We may be in there 30 minutes listening to you talk, but he knows, he's self-aware that he can talk for a long time, and he can start to. When he talks, he can start to talk in circles, and then he can also feel it, and he can redirect it right back to where it needs to be. And he's not leaving this. Another thing that he is not leaving the front of that room until he can look at everybody in the face and know that his message was received. If there's one guy that did not receive the message, he will stand up there. He will continue to beat at that message until that person's body language or expression has gotten to the point where he feels like they've accepted it. And that's something that I don't think many coaches can do. I really don't. I think it's a special characteristic, but it's something that I think a lot of people should strive to do, because when you can get everybody on the same page and everybody believing and rowing in the same direction, man, special things can happen. And he's a living proof of that.
Maybe some people naturally have that ability. That's almost salesmanship, but not in a negative way, right?
Yep.
But I also feel like that's something that can grow with time and experience. And the more that you're standing in front of teams, I think the better you'll get, the more you understand who you are and how you want your team to play. And one thing where you said those two things, steadfast and confident, I think you nailed it right there. Like that is how you have to present yourself. But what my thought is, okay, well, how do you get that? You have to be prepared. You have
No
to put in
question.
the time. If you haven't really done the scout, if you don't really know how to teach it, and you're going in and you're hoping it's going to work out, it's probably not. And the steadfast part too is almost, and this is just something I've liked to do over the years with parents, is almost be a little bit of a prophet. And kind of what you had said about, guys, here's some probably mistakes we're going to make with this, but that's okay. Like for our style of play, I tell parents turnovers are going to be really high and shooting percentage is going to be really low. But that's all right. Like we're going to stick through that because we know that in December, in January, man, that's going to flip around. It's really good to be able to say that before those things happen, because you keep a little bit, I think, of your credibility, and you allow yourself the ability to keep working through those mistakes, to be steadfast and confident. Like, hey, you're like Gannon Baker said too, you're celebrating the try while they're doing these things, and it may not look great. And Tyler Costin also said, or Mark Cassio, like if you as a coach want practice to look great, then you're not understanding what practice is all about. It's supposed to be messy and it's supposed to be ugly, but that's where then when it is, that belief in you and that ability not to waver has to come in.
Yeah, and I think you said it in terms of like your style of play and like these things are going to happen and it's okay because December, January, February, like it'll flip. Well, I think it's a lot easier to go in and be confident and steadfast. And you said it, so I'm kind of repeating it, but it's when you have the proof of concept, right? Where this did go really poorly November, December for 3 straight years, and then January, February it flipped, right? Or whatever it may be, that proof of concept is so important to get guys to believe in the first place.
And maybe a little bit, especially early on as a younger coach, you might be that duck on the pond. Like you're trying to act all calm, but underneath, you are. I was a little bit terrified. I was 30 years old. It was my first game at Faith as a head coach. And I had been with Wes Watson at McKinney High School for 5 years. And we had been running and gunning and I'd seen it work. But, 6A public school, 5A taps, different type of players and athletes. Like, could this really work? And sure enough, like we came out and shot with a lot of courage, but not a lot of makes. That first quarter was terrifying. I thought, oh, what have I done? What have I done? It turned around. It went better, but there is that part where you may have to believe a little bit while you're learning, improving the concept, but then I don't know, so much of this, it's all gain. It's like experience. Wow, I need to be a head coach to gain experience, but you don't want to go through all the trials and all the
Yeah.
tough times that it takes.
It'll be interesting. I mean, like you always said, and you said it, being the duck on the pond and handling yourself calm. And I think that's where like kind of maybe getting a little off topic here, but
Okay.
you look, people get to where they get to, these positions of authority, right? Or power, however you want to word it, because they're confident, mostly because they're confident in what they do and what they can do. And I think the pride cometh before the fall, right? You can be confident in what you do and confident on how you got to where you are, but I firmly believe there has to be some sort of humility and self-awareness
Yeah,
within
you
that
nailed it. Yeah.
that can keep you grounded enough that when things don't go well, you're like, okay, I'm not just going to keep beating my head up against a wall. I'm going to do something a little different. Okay. I'm going to adapt, which is what I mentioned earlier. Like, because if you think your way is the best way all the time and you're not self-aware or you're not humble enough to realize that your way is not working, those are when people just crumble to me at the end of the day.
I love that you brought up humility because I think everything that you've talked about so far, like that's necessary. You don't want to appear to be insane. This is clearly not going well. It will. It will.
Exactly.
I think players appreciate one that if a coach shows humility and hey guys, that one's on me. I made the wrong call. And you know
Yep.
what? We're going to get better. I'm going to get better. I'll be prepared tomorrow. I don't think that it's bad, but then at the same time, you don't want to be saying that every game, every loss,
No.
every day. Hey guys, my fault again. Well, coach, hey, can you get better? Like you've
Yeah.
been saying that every day, but I think more often it's a fear that humility will show weakness or that we don't know what we're doing. We don't have all the answers. But man, I think we've kind of gone through that authenticity of, yeah, I believe in this. There's going to be mistakes. And when there are, I'm going to own it and we're going to fix it. I
Yep.
think that goes a long way. Maybe it goes back to what you said too with your confidence. I think to have humility, you got to have confidence or else you fake it and you don't pretend that anything's wrong.
Yeah. That's true. Very true. Definitely a good way to
What
put it.
you talked about coachable as being one of those things that you look for when you're out recruiting or you're watching film. What are some of those coachable moments that really catch your eye that you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, when a coach tries to talk to you when things are going bad, right? Because when things are going good, it's easy to go over there and put your arm around the coach and like, yeah, okay, great, coach, like I'm listening to you. But like, how about when you're playing bad? Like, are you a bad teammate? Do you have bad body language? When your coach tries to pull you in, are you in the back of the huddle? Like whatever it may be, those things are they're very easy to see when someone plays bad, which is why everybody, as coaches, when you go evaluate people, you want to like them first, right? Because then you come back, but you have to be confident in knowing like, okay, this kid is good enough. This kid, I want to be a part of my program. But then you kind of want them to play bad because you don't want them to get recruited any higher. Let's just be honest, right? And then
We like
B,
you.
like,
If you could suck the rest of this AAU year, that'd be awesome.
I mean, if people aren't saying it, then they're just not being truthful. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the honesty of the recruiting business. Is when they play well and you like them and you offer them, you don't really want them to play well anymore. Assistant coaches do in front of their head coaches, but other than that, that's about it. But sorry, I got off topic. But yeah, I mean, I just look, if you can handle stuff when it goes poorly, if you can handle being coached and you can handle all that stuff, then to me, you're coachable. Because those are the hardest moments, and can you handle adversity and can you be coached in those moments? If you can, the rest will be fine.
Great story about Curry's college coach at Davidson when he was recruiting him. The game that he went to, or maybe it was even one of his first games at Davidson, he had like 9 turnovers in the game. And what his coach really loved about him was there wasn't any drooping, there wasn't an attitude shift, there wasn't a lack of belief. He was able to put it behind him and focus on what's coming up next, and he had a great game the next one. And it was kind of that moment he's like, I really knew that we had something special. And it's kind of when I talk with players about that, he's like, guys, remember, it wasn't he had a 30-point game and he knew he had something special. It was he had a horrible game, but the way that he responded to it, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is the truth. I mean, those are the people that can handle adverse situations and when they play poorly and still get out of it and show that toughness and grit that I was referring to earlier. Like, those are the teams that are the most successful, because Lord knows most of the season is ugly and it's hard and you have to go through a lot of bad to get to the good. So if you can fight through that, man, you're going to have a successful team at the end of the day.
I think so many coaches struggle with delegating. We like to do things ourselves. We want it to be done right. And you've been an assistant for a while, and again, under some great people, but now building your staff. What are some ways that you kind of divide up those responsibilities and delegate with your assistant coaches?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, obviously, with the recruiting part. So we've just all been on hands on deck for all the recruiting stuff. Associate head coach handles scheduling. Jimmy Smith handles scheduling. Jovan Austin does some player development stuff with our player development guy, Trajan Wesley. They help handle housing. There's just different things, right? Payne Andrus, one of our other assistants, is in charge of all the compliance stuff and getting the visits set up and just trying to not necessarily specialize and put people in boxes, because I don't believe in that. I think if you put people in boxes, then they never get a chance to actually show you what they can do, because you put them in a box where maybe just you think that's what they're best at. And so, but I do think you have to delegate, because let's be honest, I don't have the time or the manpower to sit here and do all this by myself. So you have to trust in the people you hire and give them the opportunity to do what you need them to do. And ultimately, the word I used in that last sentence is like, you have to trust people. And if you don't trust them, then don't hire them. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, and it's not always that simple for some people, depending on where they're at, right, with budgets or level or whatever it may be. But I hired everybody on my staff because I trust them. So the delegation that I can give out to them in each specific area, then I can let them do it, and I know they're going to do it to the best of their ability. So I don't really like have, other than just being a head coach and, the CEO, I guess you could say, of like those type things. Everybody else has a certain responsibility and it's their job to do it. And then if they have an issue and they want to come to me and talk to me about it, then let's talk about it.
I'm glad you brought up the trust thing, because I was trying to think of why wouldn't a coach delegate and allow assistants, even at the high school level, to do more. And I would think it really goes not to as it doesn't have as much to do with the assistant coaches as much as fear from me or fear from the head coach of what if it's not done right? What if they make mistakes? What if this or that? But the ability to be confident enough to trust, the humility to let go of some of that responsibility. I think like we want our players to surprise us. I think the more we allow our players to play free within some constraints that you have set up, I've seen players surprise me over the years that they do some things I didn't really think that they could. I think maybe our assistant coaches can do that, but man, I'm definitely guilty of, hey, I can get it done faster. I'll do it. No worries. I don't want to bother you. But I don't think it's because I'm that nice of a guy. I think it's just because I struggle with letting go.
Yeah, and there's some things that I'm sure in the last month that I've been here full time that I've done where I'm like, I'll just do it myself, right? I mean, I think there's every head coach has probably done something in that realm when they become a head coach or even to this day. Look, I mean, I think the one thing that you can't be, and I was telling Ross Hodge, who's one of my best friends in the business, the new head coach at West Virginia, like we were just talking about staff and, obviously being a new head coach, like I'm always curious to kind of know what he went through last year, even though he had been a head coach before in junior college. But look, I made mistakes when I was an assistant, and I was, I'm not going to say afraid, but I was always like, there was always a slight fear in me when I made mistakes to let the head coach know of those mistakes. Right. And it's not anything the head coach did poorly. It's just intrinsically, that's how I always felt. And so the one thing like I've been very cognizant of as a head coach is like, okay, I'm going to trust that the responsibilities that I'm giving my assistant coaches that they can do. But if they make a mistake, I'm not going to sit here and just destroy them over the mistakes they made, because I know I was that guy not too long ago, right? And so I don't want to sit here and be the guy who, like, when I was an assistant coach, maybe I was like, well, I wish maybe my head coach would have handled this a little differently or handled this a little differently, right? And then now I'm the head coach and then I don't handle it the right way. So like it's not always easy, but I've tried to be really cognizant and aware and self-aware of like how I handle those situations that maybe would put me in a contradictory atmosphere or whatever that may be, that I was maybe something that I didn't like in my past bosses or whatever it may be. So I think that's important too, or at least it feels important as I'm kind of navigating this.
I think it's huge to get that feedback from not only your players, but from your assistant coaches about how they think about how things are being handled. And I know as I'm getting older now, I forget what it's like to be a player, and I forget some of the things that used to really bug me. But then sometimes like some of these standards or things that I'm holding our guys to, I'm like, I mean, I didn't do that. Like, I didn't like that. Yeah, it's like, why am I even doing that? It's maybe because I work for somebody that did, or I feel like this is what hardcore coaches do. But I think another great way to think about it when I was an assistant coach, these were things. So like as those coaches that are listening that were assistants at one time, man, think back to what it was like. It's kind of like the great question of, would I want to play for me? That's
Yep.
a good question to ask, but maybe even, would I want to work for me? And if you can answer that and be honest with yourself, yeah, maybe there's going to be some hard conversations you have to have, but we want to have this culture where players can make mistakes and we're going to work with them and we're going to grow. Man, we got to make sure we create that for our assistant coaches as well.
Yeah, there's no question. That's the truth.
You mentioned a little bit ago about not wanting to do a lot of skill work, individual skill work in practice. And I get that. I completely agree. And there's Doug Novak said that all of practice is skill work. So you can kind of view it that way too, even your 5-on-5, your small sided games, whatever you're doing. And then you also mentioned too, like how much pickup you used to play. That's a tiny nugget, but I think that's something very much lost. And so in our spring at Faith, instead of working on defensive concepts for next year, that's 8 months away, or even Faith offense or anything like that, Mondays and Fridays, they play pickup. They don't play to 11. They play to 5, and it's by ones and twos, and it's quick games in and out. But it's a time for them to experiment and try things. So I love that you mentioned pickup. But since you're not looking at necessarily a lot of individual skill work in practice, how do you decide on what you're going to work on from day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, the coach speak of it as you have your daily vitamins, right? Whether that be your ball handling, your passing. Like I think people don't do passing drills because of how elementary they feel and how boring the players, probably they just don't like them. Let's be honest. But if you can make them competitive and you can do different drills that can make it a little bit more lively, then I think you can still get what you need out of it. So the daily vitamins are always going to be huge. And then you feel out like beginning of the year, when you're in the fall before your actual real practice starts, or maybe as you're getting into your normal practice, I think you have your build up, right? Of, okay, well, we're starting here with our shell drill, we're starting here with our ball screen defense, we're starting here with our sending 4 to the glass on offensive rebounding, or you're building, right? You're naturally building it as you go. Maybe it takes 2 days to get your ball screen defense down because maybe a couple guys didn't quite grasp the concept. So that part is those things to me are kind of, you're doing it year to year, and it's very similar as you start and you navigate the beginning of practice. But once you start getting into games, I mean, you're focusing on, okay, look, you have to be good in transition and I'm speaking on the defensive front here, but you have to be good in transition defense if you want to win games, right? You have to be good rebounding the ball on both sides of the floor if you want to win games. You have to take care of the ball if you want to win games. Like, very few teams can have more turnovers than their opponent and continually win. There's certain things that you have to do on the daily that are going to keep your team solid, keep your team engaged, and create those habits that they'll take over in games. But then you have to navigate, like, okay, well, we've been bad in the middle third ball screen for the last 2 weeks. It's time to really hone in on this. Okay. Or we've been horrendous in one-on-one post defense. Like, we're going to work on this for 10 minutes today. Or, man, we have got to put in a different post double defensively, because the monster big to big double is not working. Okay. So now maybe we need to do it off the bounce with with what we would consider a feeder, or whatever it may be, like things that you're not doing well. We work on those and we put a little more emphasis on that. Okay. Maybe it's your closeouts. Maybe it's your stick hand. Maybe it's just calling ball or communicating, whatever it may be. It's just emphasize those, right? Coach Sampson, you hear it all the time in his interviews. And it's funny because he almost sounds annoyed when people ask him, like, well, how are you guys good at defense? He's like, well, we emphasize it.
How else would we be? Yeah.
we're good at what we emphasize. Right?
We were born this way. No,
exactly.
No one is.
And so emphasize what you want to be good at. And then if you're not good at something, then spend time on it and emphasize what you want to be good at. Now, it sounds simple. It sounds easier than it is, because it's not always just that simple. But just making sure you're watching film, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at. Make sure you keep working on those things you're good at, but then spend more time on the things you need to get better at, on things that matter to help you win the game. Do not waste time on things that are minute, that do not help you win. Don't waste your time. Okay. And I'm not saying I have specific examples of that. Okay. But don't sit there and just sit and, okay, well, we're just going to take charges for 20 minutes. Well, nobody takes charges anymore. So you're wasting your time and your energy.
Chris Oliver with Basketball Immersion talked about how he would never do diving on the floor drills or charge drills, like drills that just force them to, we used to roll the ball, 2 guys get after it.
Oh yeah.
He's like, one, you're going to get guys hurt. And what's the best ability? Availability. But 2, if you look over the course of the game, how often do those things really happen? Not that much. Like, you don't really have dudes just flying on the floor every possession. But what does happen every game and most possessions, transition D, rebounding, and working to take care of the ball. So I think you nailed it. And that just popped in my head from Coach Oliver.
Yeah, well, and you know what you do if you don't want to work on diving on the floor for a loose ball drill? Then you know what you have to do is, whenever it happens in practice and somebody doesn't dive on it, then you blow the whistle and you emphasize it and you make somebody run for it, or whatever you're.
Or you give it a high value when it does happen.
Yep.
Hey, 5 points if you get on the floor, 4 points for a charge, 3 points for an offensive rebound, and there's a winning and a losing to the game you're playing. I think you'll get more of what you're trying to emphasize.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I love that you talked about the 3 things that you want to make sure you hit, and it just, you nailed it. It sounds simple, like these things lead to winning. But I think if we were honest, or if we would go back over our practice plans, I know I'm probably guilty of it, that in season after we built our systems and we were starting to play games, like I think it'd be interesting to see after I played a game on this date, what did this practice plan look like? Was it the same as this one the day before? Or are there differences, things taken out, things added because of what happened in the game? I don't know if I always analyze what happened in the game and how that make that have that help me dictate like what practice looks like, or this is just what we do every day. And we just kind of go through this monotony or these things. And then all of a sudden it's January. You know what? We're not good at pick and roll defense. Well, no crap. We were struggling on that 2 months ago, but you didn't spend any time on it in practice. Like allowing those games. And I think it goes back to maybe a little bit of the mindset that you talked about you having, that I don't think is a bad one of, hey, these are things that this team does, or we struggling sometimes and we got to be prepared, almost that pessimistic side, but it's good. I would encourage myself and everybody, like, practices need to change, and we need to emphasize or work on different things, not just out of the blue, literally based on what just happened in the audition or the recital that we had the night before.
Yeah, and I think the one thing too, like as an assistant coach, right? And the last 2 years at Texas Tech, like I was in charge of the defense. And so like really making sure, because there was times where I just kind of like gave in and just said, okay, fine, we won't do that today, right? Because maybe like as a head coach, you have the best feel for your team. Okay, so if you feel like your team's tired and you can't practice for more than an hour that day, you have the best feel for it. Like everybody on your staff has an opinion, okay, but you're typically going to have the best feel for we're tired. Okay, maybe today's a 5-on-0 day or whatever it may be. But I really, as an assistant coach for however many years I was, like the one thing I really tried to do was fight enough for the things that I thought we needed to work on, even when the head coach said, no, I don't want to do that today, because that's what you just said. Like our ball screen defense has been bad for 2 months. Well, the problem is if you don't fight to work on the things that you think you need to work on, when the head coach says we don't need to do that today, well, eventually you look down and you're like, okay, so in the last 20 practices, it's happened 5 times where I wanted to do this and we didn't do it because I didn't fight enough for it. Right. And it's not necessarily saying the head coach is wrong. It's just there's things that if you feel strongly about it, then fight for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way it's going to stay in there. And then when you look back 2 months later, you're like, well, we actually have been pretty good because I fought for the fact of we need to do middle third ball screens. And so, yeah, we could have taken it out 5 different times, but we didn't. And then we actually got really good at it. And you look back, you're like, I'm glad I fought for it. And so, I mean, those are the things I would challenge like an assistant coach. And I hope my assistant coaches do it for me, because I know there's going to be times where I'm like, nah, we're not doing that today. Like, no, fight me on it, because I know that was something that, I
If you
had to
really
get better
believe
at.
in it, if you really
And I
believe
got
this
better
is
at
what
it.
we do, then don't back down.
Yep, for sure.
I think 2 things there is, one, be the head coach that truly wants to know what the coaches are thinking. And I had probably year 2 or 3 at Faith, I had an older gentleman that I've known since I was in high school, played old man ball, older adult leagues with him. So he's kind of a mentor of mine, but he came on staff to help me getting started there. And man, one time he was like, Coach, or he was like, Matt, do you want to hear, kind of what I'm thinking? I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, no, hold on. Do you really want to know? And I was like, yes, Dave. Like, tell me. He's like, I'll tell you, but I don't feel like you really want to know sometimes. Like, I needed to hear that. I was so just kind of stuck in my ways and like blowing and going that, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Not even acknowledging, really doing it. So be the coach that will listen, but then remember to get like hire assistants or encourage your assistants to be that tough, to fight for what they believe in that much, because we all have our tunnel vision, or the things that, like, I'm an offensive minded coach. If I had it my way, we wouldn't do a defensive drill all year. We would do offense and just say, they're guarding us. We're getting good at it anyway. That's what I would love to do. But I hire people, or I have guys that are like, hey, this is what we got to do today. We have to work on this. those are two reminders, I think, based on those things you said. I would imagine as the defensive guy for the last 2 years, when I say that I would rather not do that. I probably just lost some credibility in you. That you're thinking I need to get off this call right now. I get that.
Trust me. There were many days where I would go in there, we would write up our practice plan, we would take it in there and sit with the staff and dissect the practice plan. And there was a lot of times I'm like, you know what? I kind of wish just to just take it out. Let's just take it out because I'm not in the mood to fight today.
I spent a lot of time on this, but forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Just one day is fine. Yeah, no, trust me, I get it.
We talked a lot about confidence in coaches and how we need to have it, but we also need to help our players with their confidence. I'm a believer that we don't create confidence in our players, that they have to create that themselves, protect it through the hard work, but we can influence and maybe we can help it grow. What are some things that you do to build confidence in your players?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. You kind of stole the thunder a little bit with the word of it, but like, I mean, the only way I know how to build confidence is to work at something. And I mean, you're never going to be a great golfer if you're not on the range, right? You're never going to be a great shooter if you're not practicing. You're never going to be great at something if you don't practice it. And so you have to like actually spend the time and go out there and work on your game, and you build confidence through that. And then when you bring that confidence to the floor, for whether it be in practice or whether it be in the game, now that's where the coaching probably comes in of like, okay, I told, John Doe that if he works on his 3-point shot, I'll let him shoot. Okay. Well, what you can't do is the first time he misses it, be like, don't shoot that shot again. It sounds simple, but it can negate everything they did in the summer with one comment.
Yeah.
Because I've heard it. I've heard, well, like a guy gets in the transfer portal and it's like, well, why do you want to transfer? Well, because coach, in January said like, I don't want you to shoot that again. One comment. And that's all it takes because that's all they remember. And so you have to be really careful because you still need to have role identification. And you don't want just everybody feeling like they can shoot whatever shot they want. That's not the best way to be a good team, right? At least in my experience. I'm talking to an offensive guy, but that's been my experience. Is like there has to be guys that know what they're good at, and you can't just let everybody shoot the exact same shot. But
No doubt.
also you have to help guys. If you're going to tell them work on this, then when they come back in the fall and they've gotten better at it, but they still have to be able to build the confidence within practice and games. You can't crush them when it doesn't go well the first couple times if that's something that you've told them that you want them to have confidence in. So I think making sure in your self-awareness of how you're handling those situations and how impactful a single word can be when it's talking about individual offensive game, because I'm telling you, nothing cuts deeper and faster and harder than talking down on someone's offensive game. Nothing. Not in basketball. There's not one thing that'll cut down a player's confidence more than when you talk about their offense.
That's big time. And the power of words, kind of that's what I wrote down is, I think when you mentioned that, I know I thought of the countless throwaway statements over the years that I've done that I didn't even realize how much that hurt or how deep that went. And so being conscious of what we're saying, huge, man. And you nailed it with, especially on the offensive side. And we do shoot a lot of threes, and don't shoot that or stop shooting that isn't something that I say. But you said it, you nailed it though. It comes from role identification, shot selection scale that everybody is on the same page with. That's day one of practice or workouts, in my opinion. And then also the shooting games or individual skill work or something where they are constantly being, a hierarchy is developing. So when Johnny is taking 10 threes a game, no one says anything about it because of the work that we've all seen him put in. I'm far below him, so I probably only get one or two. But I think the way that we communicate those, whether it's with kind of that sandwich effect of a positive, there's the criticism and then a positive, where I've heard some coaches say, man, it's a 6-to-1 ratio, 6 positive things to that one that it's the critique, it's the instruction. I don't know, however you do it, but I think being conscious of what we say, huge.
Yeah, and you know, when we were beginning at North Texas, Ben McCollum was at Northwest Missouri State, was having a ton of success. So Mac became really close with him. Grant McCaslin get really close with Ben McCollum. Both their nicknames are Mac, so it can get a little confusing.
Okay.
And the one thing that Coach McCollum always said was, whether it's completely true or not, and some of it's coach speak, is he tried not to tell them what not to do. He would just try to tell them what to do, right? So, hey, when in this situation, like, drive it hard, or cut from the corner, or like do some different things rather than saying, don't shoot that shot. Just be like, hey, look, when a guy's attacking you, like, drive that closeout. So now you can kick it, and then maybe you can relocate, and maybe you can shoot the next one that's wide open, or just trying to navigate those situations with different words rather than just saying, don't shoot that shot, or we don't want you shooting threes, or, just different ways that you can navigate it where you can, fix the words enough where it doesn't feel like you're just completely taking their confidence away from them, but also making sure they know, like, when they close out like this, you need to drive it, because this is going to help us get points in the paint, or you need to cut here because of guys lost vision of you, or whatever it may be. Like, those things, just using your words in a different way that can help them understand something without crushing their confidence.
If they truly are co-creators with us of either culture or the way that we're playing, and I mean, you played, I used to play, but coach, it's been 25 years since I took a shot. Like I won't take one ever again in a game, and so I need them really being on board with what we're trying to do. And what stops that is negative reinforcement, negative comment, telling them to stop, don't,
Yep.
anything like that. And this goes back to PGC again. Mono Watsa, coach, I hated this at the beginning because I went to PGC to direct, but and this was just as a high school coach, I had no training in it. And Mono sitting in my first classroom session, if you remember back, to all those classroom sessions, and the one that he came in was cracking the pressure code. And so it's about breaking pressure. And it was my time to get up there and do it. And Mono's sitting there my very first session, and the kid falls asleep in the front. And I clap my hands. I go, hey, wake him up. And everybody straightens up, and he wakes up. So Mono, later on, we're eating dinner, and he's giving me his pages of notes from my court session, from all of this and things. But he's like, Matt, how can we help him make the decision for himself to stay awake rather than pointing at him and demanding and screaming that he get up? But the whole idea was the question method. Like I want, if we're constantly learning through this, I want to help them see, Johnny, rate that shot. What do you think it was? Coach, it was a 6 on our scale. Yeah, you know what? I agree. Why'd you feel like you shot the 6? Well, I haven't touched the ball in a while. I get that. Well, you know what? We do need to move it more. I need you to trust that ball is going to come around to you. That takes a lot more time, coach, than stop shooting dumb shots. That's not your shot. But if I would argue, take the time, ask the questions, get to the root of really what's happening, keep the player engaged and moving towards the goal with us. But it takes effort.
Yep. No, I agree. Completely agree.
I got one more, coach, and then we will do the speed round. These will be quick questions that will really get to know who you are. Meeting with players. We've talked a ton about the relationships really that you're building with them, how to communicate. How can you hold somebody accountable and confront them? There has to be that relationship. So I would imagine meeting with players is important. How and when do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can vary depending on the time of year. One of the best relationship coaches I've ever been with or coached under was Earl Grant, who's at Boston College now. I was at the College of Charleston with him. He would always seek out one player before practice, one player after practice every day. He would sit down with them, 10 or 15-minute conversation before practice, 10 or 15-minute conversation after practice with individual guys. And before you know it, you're talking to 2-3 guys every day, and that's just before and after practice. And so if you're able to navigate that, whether it's show them a couple clips of film or talk about whatever, and a lot of people say, well, don't talk about basketball. Well, in different settings, yes, but ultimately, like, they're here to play basketball, and that's really what these guys want to talk about. I mean, they don't want to sit here and talk about their dogs to me. They will, right? They don't want to sit and talk about their favorite restaurant or their favorite rapper or their favorite country artist or whatever it may be. Like, those conversations, they're like, coach, like, I mean, let's talk hoops, right? In those settings. Now, when you get them up here individually in your office and you can talk about life, you can talk about their future, you can talk about their family, you can talk about a lot of different things. But when you're in a setting at practice, like, show them a couple clips, give them some confidence, give them some positive words. I think is always impactful when you can get them short doses, short bursts of communication with them to feel like they've gotten some attention, right? Everybody likes attention. I like attention. My wife likes attention. My dogs like attention. My kids like attention. Everybody likes attention to a certain degree. And so just give some attention and be intentional about it in those settings with before and after practice. And then I'm a big believer in, like, if you're around here, okay, and some of the places that people may work aren't this way. Our practice gym is literally right outside of my office. Okay. And look, if you're up here getting extra shots at night and I'm here, come up to the office for 5 minutes. Like, I don't want to be, you can set meetings and try to get like one guy for 15 minutes and then schedule another guy for 15 and do it all the way throughout the day if you like. I mean, I think those times, there are times that call for that. But if you can get the guys to want to come up to the office and to want to come through the office where the coaches are whenever they're up here, I think that's the most advantageous, and has probably brought the most connected conversations is when those happen, because they're not structured. They're just like off the cuff, and you're not necessarily bringing them in to talk about a certain thing that's been on your mind. So is there room for all the other conversations? Absolutely. But I am a big believer in catching people before and after practice, and then when they're up here getting their own work in, or when they're in the training room or in the weight room getting extra work, whatever it may be, like, come through the office, even if it's for 2 minutes. You know what I mean? And so I think those are the best ways to communicate and meet with players.
I think you're right that you can go overboard either way. I think you nailed it. It's both. It's structured and then it's random. But you're really, I think you're talking about culture. Have you set up a culture where guys know that coach wants me to come by when I'm here? But he is encouraging it. He's going to say, "Hey, I think I saw you shooting. You didn't come by." Like it. I think instead of a knock and coach, sorry to bother you, if they know that there's no such thing. I mean, I was terrified to go to my coach's office in college, Coach Bliss. In fact, the one time that when we would walk in, the secretary sometimes would be like, "It's okay." She would let me know, like, it's nothing bad. Oh, thanks. Okay. So you don't want that, but then also I wouldn't, yeah, you're right. I wouldn't apologize for talking about basketball. It's what they love to do. You're kind of important in that way to them, and you guys both love it. You have that in common. I may not have a lot of common with these 18-year-olds now as a 43-year-old. We definitely don't listen to the same music. I don't know a lot of the pop references or culture that they talk about, but man, hoops, we can talk about that. I think every player wants to feel like this person can help me get better.
No
And
question.
what better way than watching some film, having, hey, I watched the game last night. I was thinking about you when I saw this. And then, so I believe it's a combination of, you got to have a little structure to it. Like your coach had with one before, one after, one or two, and probably having a list of the guys that he hasn't hit. Because if you're just hoping that it happens, it's not going to hope. It's not going to happen, right? Don't base our game on hope, but then open up the opportunities and the culture for the random talks, because sometimes those are the best ones.
No question. Those are always the best ones, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Coach, the speed round. All right,
Okay.
quick questions. Some people think that they know you, but then after these, we really will. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
Easy one. Easy one. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookies and cream.
Okay, now, are you a sweets fan? Because you hesitated. If not, where do you go to? If you're not an ice cream fan, that's okay.
No, I am an ice cream fan, but I'll tell you what, if I'm going to go ice cream, I'm going Dairy Queen Blizzard, and I'm going to go half M&M, half Reese's Cups.
Let's get real here, Coach. That's what I'm talking about. All right. Yes. Greatest shooter of all time.
Larry Bird.
Not Steph.
Well, I mean, Steph is kind of the foregone conclusion, so I'll go with somebody different.
That's fair. Man, I've been watching the Celtics show on Max, HBO Max, where they go back from Cousy all the way through. Like every episode is a kind of a different time period or decade with the team. Just getting through the Larry Bird stuff where he's just now starting to get run down and hurt, but he was incredible.
Man, he was special.
Okay, new question. Do you stand up or sit down during games?
Stand up.
Okay. Top 3 dinner guests of all, and you can choose any time period.
Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and my dad.
Your dad.
Be a hell of a dinner.
Some winners there. That's good. That's good. Best basketball movie of all time.
Hoosiers. Not close. Hold on, let me try.
For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Shot clock, please. Please, Texas, go to a shot clock.
Basketball's too good for not to have one, in my opinion.
It's just, I mean, listen, I know teams have to do it because maybe they're not as good, maybe they're not as athletic, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe the shot clock would increase blowouts, but I just watching a team have the ball on offense for a minute is no fun.
And as an offensive coach, can't stand guarding it for a minute. Like I actually told, I'm going to lose a lot of credibility here. I told we were really working on this. Coach Smith has a great zone that he used at Trinity. I think I felt like I saw an NBA team doing it the other day, but you know, with their defensive 3-second rules, the goalie was moving a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we were playing a pressure 3-2 that Randall Durant in this area from Keller High School really made big, and a lot of guys use it now, but it can really mess with a team. But they were just moving it. And I turned to my assistant and I said, "We're playing too good of defense. Like they're not doing anything. They're not shooting. We're not getting a steal. This is just taking forever." And my assistant, who's a defensive guy, just shook his head. Like, don't ever say that. But anyway, just lost it. Thanks for staying on during that. Okay. Do players sit the rest of the half with 2 fouls?
Man, this is a tough one. I think it's very dependent on the player because we would always fight about this on the bench. If certain players get 2 fouls that are always gambling or reaching in and don't have the mental capacity to not foul, then I'm sitting them on the bench. If there's a guy that just typically is not going to foul out, whether it's because he's not a physical defender, he's not really involved in a lot of actions, whatever it may be, then I'm playing him.
Like that. I agree with depends on the player. A hard, fast rule, an absolute with that. And then you got guys like Nate Oates that are like, why am I going to sit him? Fouls happen. Doesn't matter if it's in the first quarter or first half or second half. So I'm with you there. Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
You're up 3 on defense with 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Fouling every time.
What book would you give someone?
Man, I'll tell you one of the best books I read, and it's not really anything like informational, and it's probably just a book that stuck with me. But I read I May Be Wrong, But I Doubt It, Charles Barkley's book. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Coach, that's a first. But I love Barkley.
I love he's authentic, he's wild, he says some wild stuff, but I enjoy the randomness because a lot of people, coaches especially, coach speak, whatever you may want to call it, but he has none of that. And so he's off the cuff, he's he just kind of says whatever he thinks, and he doesn't care what the blowback will be from it.
And I think a lot of times, Coach, it makes a lot of sense what he says.
It does. It does. In a roundabout way, it does.
Yeah. I think him and Jeff Van Gundy are two of my favorite just basketball analysts. That may be a good question, Coach. Favorite basketball analyst? Go.
Yeah, that's a great Kevin Harlan.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a new question. I'm putting that in there, man.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Okay. Interesting question to ask you where you're at starting out at SFA. If this was your last year of coaching, what would you do more of?
Golf. I'd do less coaching and more golf.
That's it.
No, I mean, honestly, I would probably, and I really try not to take myself too serious.
Yeah.
Either with my staff or whatever it may be, but I would probably just make sure like I'm really enjoying the moment, knowing it would be the end.
That's it, man. The golf thing was funny. That's the real answer. It could be a real answer to that is we take ourselves too serious. It is serious what we're doing, and it's very important.
Yep.
But not taking ourselves too serious. I think that's huge. Last one
I agree.
in basketball, who is the GOAT?
Man, I always the greatest, and I know people will say, the greatest winner and most rings and all that. To me, the greatest competitor, the greatest winner is Michael Jordan, but the greatest all-around basketball player that's ever lived is LeBron James. The most impactful in what he does on a basketball court, it's LeBron James. But in terms of winning and not losing very often and the competitive side of it, Michael Jordan.
That answer surprised me a little bit just because Michael Jordan was a part of your dinner. But so I thought it was just going to be clear cut, like that's who it is. But I like the way he answered that. And there's no right answer, obviously. But
I mean, if I was starting my franchise and everybody that's ever played was in their prime, I'm taking Michael Jordan over LeBron James because ultimately, I probably can't say it on the podcast, but ultimately he's going to whip everybody.
Yeah.
And he's going to tell you about it. And those are
But you can say whip everybody on the podcast. You can say that.
Well, yeah.
That's a good question too. Who'd you start with? And again, in their prime Shaq is hard to look past.
Man.
Maybe one of the most dominant forces on the floor in the moment, but I would still probably go with Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Shaq couldn't make free throws would probably keep me out of that conversation. But Shaq it was an unstoppable force. You could not stop him.
Coach, this has been so awesome. Man, you gave me an hour and a half of your time, and I'm really humbled by that. Love getting to learn more about you, and this was just awesome.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate having me on, and hopefully we can do this again in a couple years, and hopefully we can talk about some of the championships we've won along the way.
Love that. We didn't get into much X's and O's here and stuff, and I rarely do. But if coaches they did want to connect with you, maybe come to a practice. I'm assuming you want guys to come down there and see the great facilities. I love that campus. Like that's a beautiful place. What's a good way for them to maybe get in contact with you or somebody within your staff?
Yeah, email Duncan Bacon. He's our director of operations, and you can email me as well. I'm just probably not as good on email as he would be. So if you email him, he'll let me know. I would love for anybody and everybody to come check us out, come to practice. I am who I am. I coach how I coach, so I'm not afraid to open practice and let everybody in on how we do things.
Love that, Coach. I can't wait. I'll be rooting you guys on next year, rooting for you. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.